14 starts out. At the time of Herod the Tetrarch, at that time Herod the Tetrarch heard of the fame of Jesus, and he said unto his servants, "This is John the Baptist risen from the dead." And he goes on to say how John was put into prison, why he was put into prison, because of that infamous dance, of the illicit relationship between Herod and the woman he was living with, and how John the Baptist sat in prison. We just heard a song about people in prison, and that's one of the reasons I chose it. I wanted to sensitize people to thinking what it was like for John to be in prison. A few chapters back, he had sent men to Jesus to say, "Are you really the one?" And Jesus answered them. And now John is in prison, awaiting what will happen to him. And Matthew tells us in chapter 14 that story. And then we go on and we see that a chain of events has started. Jesus, reacting to the news that John the Baptist had died, went out to be alone. But he couldn't be alone because the people wouldn't leave him alone. Those of you who watched last night, remember we talked about how the people went with him everywhere. Crowds of people. And he didn't send them away. He healed their sick. And I really like that. When I teach this chapter to children, they react rather badly to what happened with John the Baptist. And they go, "Oh, how could God let that happen?" One for Satan's side. And I showed them how I looked at that. This is God's side. 1 point for God's side. Satan's side. We know who will win. But sometimes children really need to see this shown out. And they say, "Oh, John the Baptist was arrested. 1 point. John the Baptist was beheaded. 2 points." And I say, what did Jesus do? Jesus could have stricken them all dead if he'd wanted to. But he didn't. What did he do? He went out to be alone. And when the people came, he healed a man. And then he healed another one, and 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 another one. And he taught them. He spread the good news. And I can't make enough marks over here to show you that this was allowed. And the God side. There's no comparison. The way Jesus reacted was to heal the sick. And when he did that, they were there long enough, and the people, after a time, got hungry. And he fed them with that wonderful story that the children always love about the loaves and fishes. And when that was all done, this man who still had in him his personal, private reaction to what happened with John the Baptist, he told his disciples, "Go on, take the boat and go. Don't worry about me. I want to be alone with the Father." And he spent time alone in prayer, doing what he needed to do, perhaps reflecting on what he knew one day would happen with him and what he must yet go through, the path he must walk. We don't know. And then the disciples are in the boat, and it's dark. They're so far away from the shore, even the crickets' sound no longer comes. Only sound is the lapping of the waves, gentle waves against the boat. And they're sleepy, and it's dark. And the stars are out. Maybe a little moonlight. And as they look out across the water, they are amazed to see a form too far away to recognize, and too close to be coming from the shore. They're in the middle of the lake. And as it approaches, they see their master. And Jesus calms their fear with his voice. He's not a ghost. And Peter says, Lord, if it's you, I'm coming. Tell me to come. And Jesus beckons him. And Peter does what I think is the most amazing thing. He puts his leg up over the side of the rail. He hoists the other leg up on that smooth, well-worn wood. And then he slips off, not into, but onto the water. I think that's wonderful. That's faith. One of my favorite stories, and a story which touched my life in a very real way. And he walks to the master. Maybe someone sends a few rough waves and a little wind, and for a moment his resolve, his faith, his trust is weakened. But the Lord is there. He doesn't let him sink. He's right there. And he walks him to the boat. And you know, God is like that. We may start out some things with great faith, but sometimes when we weaken for a minute, he's right there. If we just reach out and take his hand, he's there. He will see us back to the boat. And that's basically what's going on there. And in order to help children remember it, I put together a poem that the Lord gave me, and it goes like this. John the Baptist died in a cell all cold and dark because he'd spoken out against Herod the Tetrarch. When Jesus heard the news, he went out to be alone. But a crowd of thousands followed, and he wouldn't send them home. It was war, you see, and Jesus understood that healing their diseases was a victory for good. And when evening came, he wouldn't send them away. With a few loaves and fish, he fed them all that day. I want to do that one more time because I want you to do it along with me, feel it, begin to let that speak to you a little bit more. Starts out, remember the picture. John the Baptist died in a cell all cold and dark because he'd spoken out against Herod the Tetrarch. When Jesus heard the news, he went out to be alone, and a crowd of thousands followed, and he wouldn't send them home. It was war, you see, and Jesus understood that healing their diseases was a victory for good. And when evening came, he didn't send them away. With some loaves and fish, he fed them all that day. I love that little poem. I hope that speaks to you as it does to me, and helps you to see that these are not isolated events, unrelated, but these things happened, and they're recorded in Matthew because they interact with each other and they teach us something. When we get to chapter 15, Jesus is again confronted with his friends, the Pharisees. And it begins like this. Then came to Jesus scribes and Pharisees, which were of Jerusalem, saying, Why do thy elders transgress the tradition? Why do thy disciples transgress the tradition of their elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. And Jesus went on to explain to them how he saw the law and their interaction with it. And he told them in very strong words what he thought of people who made laws and rules that kept his lost sheep from following the path. One day in my Sunday school class, I took some chalk and I drew a road on the floor with short carpeting. And I showed the gates to heaven at one end. And then I had Jesus standing here going, this way. This is the way. This is the way. My word, follow me. This is the way. And over here are the scribes and the Pharisees saying, no, you got to go here and here, and you got to do this, and you got to wash this way, and do this and do this. And it was like a game board that went the other direction, and Jesus was mad. And to tell them how he felt, he said, you're like weeds that are going to be pulled up and burned one day. You're like blind guides leading other blind men, and you're both going to fall into a pit. Strong words, but it was important. And to explain this to the children, I put together a little song that's lighter than what we've been doing. They like it, they're ready for it by then. And it goes like this. Chapter 15, chapter 15, what you eat won't make you unclean. God cares more what you think and you say than if you washed your hands today. So if you're feeling angry and mean, maybe you're the one who's unclean. Chapter 15, chapter 15. Chapter 15, chapter 15, it's what you say that makes you unclean. The heart has a door and it's called your mouth. When you open it up, what was in comes out. So if you're feeling angry and mean, maybe you're the one who's unclean. Chapter 15, chapter 15, chapter 15, yeah. It's hard to do with just one person. It's a lot more fun with 20 kids, particularly at the end. We come down lower and lower. And there's a reason we do that. You see, I don't want the children just to know and understand this. I want them to know where it is. And the kids I work with do. And the way they know is that we put the chapter numbers into almost every song that goes along. So they've got something to anchor into. And even I can't remember things that all easily. I can tell you chapter by chapter everything that happens in Matthew up to about chapter 18 where I've taken this so far. I want to do it one more time because I want you to know the song. I don't just want you to hear me do it. Hearing me do it, seeing me do it, you say, well, she sings, she dances, she does all these things, but that's not my style. I can't do those things. I'm a person who really likes to sit in a chair and be very quiet. That may be the case, but I'd be a fool for God if it helped me learn. And I want people to know that there's a child inside each one of us who remembers and learns and feels and understands better when we sing and move. So let's do it one more time. Chapter 15, chapter 15, what you eat won't make you unclean. God cares more what you think and you say than if you washed your hands today. So if you're feeling angry and mean, maybe you're the one who's unclean. Chapter 15, chapter 15, it's what you say that makes you unclean. The heart has a door and it's called your mouth. When you open it up, what was in comes out. So if you're feeling angry and mean, maybe you're the one who's unclean. Chapter 15, chapter 15, chapter 15, yeah. That's how we see chapter 15. Now, chapter 15 goes on with a few other things that happen. We're not going to get into all of it tonight, but I want you to notice the balance here. Look across here. And the reason there's a split in here is not because I feel there's a real division between the chapters. It's because in the room we put this in, there was a door there. And if there weren't, this would have been made to flow. Notice the shape here. Then notice the shape here. It's the same thing, only it's inverted. And that's for a reason. That's to get the sense of the balance, because the things that happen here are similar. Here we have a Canaanite woman coming to Jesus for healing. Great crowds coming to him, again being healed. just like over there. And we have Jesus performing another miracle with loaves and fishes. And this way it's very easy to see his response to what happened here, and his response to the Pharisees who again tried to stand in his way. Satan used Herod to stand in Jesus' way, he thought. But he couldn't defeat Jesus. And one of the greatest miracles he performed came right after that event. And here again, the Pharisees stand in front of him and challenge the way he does things. And he deals with it and goes right on to perform a beautiful miracle, one that people take and cherish to this day. And that's a real short version of what we do with chapters 14 and 15. I want to say, I said this last night, but I'm sure a lot of people might be watching who didn't watch last night, that when we teach this, we don't need to go through it this fast. And in fact, the children I'm working on this with, we have been working on this for a year. And we keep going back and over it because we want them to know it, to own it, to feel it, and to feel that it's a friend. And when we study it, we read the Word of God. Even if the children are very young, and some of the kids we work with are, we read the Word of God, or we read it to them, and explain it in a way that they can understand it, because that's important. We don't use condensed versions. We read what's there, and then we interpret it visually and in song and movement and music. And that's Matthew, chapters 14 and 15.